Hey everybody, it's Dan. Welcome back and welcome to Let's Paint video. First one actually in a while that we're doing here. This is of a Warmachine Cryx warband, which was sent to me by my pal Young Seward. I've got a video where I unboxed a whole care package from him, and these figures were included in there. And I'm pretty excited about these. I think these look fantastic. These are STLs, well, they're resin prints of STLs that were produced by Steamforged Games, which took over the Warmachine IP from Privateer Press. And I think these look really good, better than anything I think Privateer Press was putting out like a decade ago, which is probably when I last played Warmachine. These, instead of looking almost like World of Warcraft cartoony, which is kind of the aesthetic that I always felt Warmachine was in the lane of, this is more like a 40k faction, like something between like Cultists, Dark Eldar, and Necrons. I don't know. Anyway, so let's get painting here. So what I'm doing here, this is going to be part of my razzle dazzle technique, which is going to involve blocking out some mostly thin down colors to kind of like ink some spaces, and we're going to do a very light dry brush of mostly just white, and then a heavy wash, and then some kind of technical effects. So to achieve that, what we're starting with is a very dark silver color. This is Iron Warriors from Citadel, so just going through and blocking out all the metal bits that are all over these figures. And I had decided early on that I wanted to do a muted, kind of limited palette with these figures. There's only 7 models in the warband, so to tie them together, I picked like 4 colors that are going to be the basis of most of the figure. And then I'll again add some technical effects like rust and stuff for some pops of color. But what we're doing after the metal is down, which was I think the majority color on these figures, is I'm going to go through with this skin color. About half the models have kind of like a brute design to them, which have some rotten flesh showing through. So I'm using Iron Rock skin from Citadel. And what you saw me doing there is thinning the paint down to about a 50-50, like 1-to-1 ratio of paint and Vallejo thinning medium. And if you've seen any of my other painting videos, you'll know that that turns it almost into like a contrast paint that, it flows quite like a contrast paint. I'm doing the same thing with black, a Bad and Black from Citadel there, but also thinned down about 1-to-1. And what that will do is, in behaving like a contrast paint, it's going to flow into the recesses. It's going to leave some lighter areas up toward the upper ridges of the figure, which will then boost with a very light dry brush step. So in order to do that, again, we thin the paint down about 1-to-1. And then I'm going through and just blocking things out. Black is going to be the main unifying color here. Again, I mentioned I'm going with a very muted for me because I like lots of colors in my figures. So this was a little bit stressful, but just going through and painting the figures, again, mostly silver and black with some like skin and tan accents. As I said, that we'll do some pops of color because I can't help myself toward the end after we've washed the figures. So going through again, blocking out in black, and the black is quite thinned down, again 50-50 or so with that thinning medium, and it's going to create again, by flowing into the recesses, kind of graduation of color, which we will then, as I said, boost up with a dry brush step. I think if I was not going with a limited palette here, what I'm painting here are some like tattered pieces of cloth that are on these kind of brute figures. I think I would probably mix up the browns and the beiges to just add some variety, but again, for the sake of simplicity, for the sake of adhering to my rule on a limited palette, I stuck with just Steel Legion Drab. So I've thinned that down as well, and you can see it's kind of flowing like a contrast paint like I keep talking about. So going through and painted up all the rags in that beige color. And there are a few accents that I wanted in gold. I love gold. I'm mostly a fantasy player, so I like gold as an accent color. It's very useful. But I was quite sparing here. So there are a couple of spots on the figures that have these long, almost like trench cloak robes. The one caster and the 2 solos that almost look like, characters from Hellraiser or something like that. And so I painted those, the trim in gold, but then on everything else, I had to restrain myself by saying I was only going to paint these flathead screws in gold. You can see there I'm painting them up on this Hulk figure here. And there's a handful of other figures that have that kind of same kind of Pokeball looking design. So that's how I restrained myself, as I said, I'm only going to highlight gold on that particular piece. Then what I'm doing, I'm coming in pre-shading. We're going to do a very heavy shade of Agrex Earthshade. but I'm using Caribird Crimson from Citadel to add a little bit of like red, make the skin kind of look irritated at the points where metal and skin are touching each other. So it's mostly on these kind of thrall figures and that big brute figure that I'm going through and doing this step on. A little bit watered down, but mostly just straight out of the pot. Caribird Crimson, and as I said, I'm not washing the entire skin with it. I'm just picking out the contact points between the skin and the metal. On these figures with long black robes, because we're going to be dry brushing in pure white, just a dusting dry brush just to kind of pick out some highlights, I thought as an intermediate step I should dry brush in gray. This is Dawnstone, which is a Citadel dry paint, so it's very good for dry brushing. You can of course use like Codex gray if you still got that laying around, but just a nice kind of intermediate gray color that I'm going through and dry brushing over all of the black areas. So I even did this on the figures that just have kind of like ripped clothing, but it was especially important I think on these long flowing trench coats, because as I said, the next step is we're going to dry brush in pure white, which I'm now doing. I've transitioned here to pure white. It's just a dusting of a dry brush here, and it's better to rein yourself in and come back and hit it multiple times if you want to add some more. I will keep saying in all of these videos that it looks a little bit silly at this stage because we really are boosting the highlights up to 11, but then we're going to mute it down and tint them a bit with a heavy wash in the next step. So I'm going through again, just dry brushing everything but the metal. All the metal bits we're going to take care of after the wash step. I found that's just easier. But again, we're just going through and dry brushing in pure white, very light dusting. I use makeup brushes now, which I would strongly recommend. They're super cheap, either at Walmart or on Amazon, Temu, something like that. They don't have to be fancy, but they're super soft and great for especially this kind of ultra light dry brush work. So again, going around, hitting everything in light white. It's okay if you hit the metal areas, but as I've said multiple times, you don't have to worry. Like if you hit the metal, it's fine. It's gonna get washed, but you don't want to be deliberately highlighting the metal because we're going to be using a bright silver color once the figure is washed in order to highlight those areas up. So again, kind of extra long footage of here of me dry brushing in white. What we're going to do though, once you finish this up, is you're going to take that same white color if you'd like to, and you can boost the highlights up a little bit more by taking like a fine detail brush and doing what I call like dot highlights on the upper areas, and this is what I'm starting to do here. And you're mostly going to focus on the areas that light would be kind of reflecting off of in an extreme way. I'm big on this because I feel, especially with tabletop gaming, like painting miniatures for tabletop gaming, contrast is key. As opposed to like a diorama painting, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this, but because you're trying to get the models to stand out on a tabletop, you want lots of extreme contrast. So that's what we're doing here. So just very sparing with these highlights. You're only, highlighting, basically you're highlighting the white that got picked up on the dry brush step, but you're just like picking out things like you see there, like knuckles, kind of the upper areas, maybe on a robe. Be sparing. Again, you can always add more if you'd like, but especially if you're trying this out for the first time, it's easy to go overboard with it because this is pure white. This is not, especially for like skin colors and stuff like that, this is not like an upper highlight of skin color. This is pure white, so it's easy to go overboard. So once that's done, I come in and I use, this is actually like a mix of Agrax Earthshade, a little bit of strong and medium tone from the Army Painter dropper bottles, which are acrylic based. But you could use any wash that you want as long as it's a nice heavy wash and as long as you are thorough with it. So you want to go through and give it a hell of a bath as you're going through and washing this figure. Like, again, the counterpart to the lightest dry brush maybe you've ever done with the white dry brushing. This is like the heaviest wash that you'll ever do. And if you do it right, you should have to like wick a little bit away, prevent it from pooling, especially on flat areas. If you like, you could actually, this is the best thing you could use is Army Painter dip. Like you could just dip the model and it's going to achieve even better results than what I could pull off here. It's just, for me, especially painting like 7 models at a time, it's more of a pain. But if you're painting a whole army up this way, I would strongly recommend you consider looking into Army Painter dip. It's more like a wood stain, oil-based, rather than acrylic paints. But here, yeah, I let them dry overnight because it's such a heavy wash. And you could theoretically be done here if you wanted to be. I would recommend maybe just like a light dry brush of a bright silver color on the metal areas and then hit it with a matte varnish of some kind. But I wanted to add some color, as I had alluded to earlier. So what I'm doing, this is my like rust effect technique. You could use the Ryza rust from Citadel if you've got that, but I don't recommend you dry brush with it because rust does like pick up on upper areas of a rusty substance. But if you look at pictures of like rust just on Google, you'll see a lot of it goes down into recesses as well. So what I recommend is load a dry brush like you're going to dry brush in orange. This is just Jacaro orange acrylic paint, and then you're actually going to stipple with it. So go around, you can be as heavy-handed or as light-handed as you want to be. I kind of go like a medium route here, but you can see there's lots and lots of metal on these figures, so I'm going through and stippling where I want rust to appear. And then what you're going to do is take a very light silver color. This is Shining Silver from Army Painter, but you could use Runefang Steel, any other bright silver color. It's just important, again, going back to my comment on contrast, that it be a very bright silver color. So you're going to then just dry brush over all the metal bits. And you can see here there's plenty of metal to pick up, lots of little like edges and stuff too, which makes this technique even more effective. And you're going to hit all of it. So just be careful not to hit any of the non-metallic areas, as you wanted to be kind of careful in the white dry brush step not to hit the metal. And here too, you want to be careful not to dry brush metallic onto like a skin tone or onto the cloth, something like that. But yeah, you can see I picked a lot of areas to be metal just because I wanted this to be a limited palette. And then as with the white, this is kind of we're mirroring the steps that we did there. I'm taking then a detail brush and going through and just picking out some areas. I wouldn't really call it edge highlighting, because if anything, you're following kind of more like a jagged line. You're not going to properly edge highlight the entire thing. It's more just about picking out some areas to make it look like light is reflecting and creating some kind of extreme pop highlights that I think look pretty cool on the table. So once you've done that, gone through and highlighted out whatever you wanted with the silver, I wanted to paint these lenses. I had thought initially about doing like a glowing effect here, but I thought it would just be too much. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use these Citadel technical paints. Like this is Waystone Green, I think. These are the ones that came out just prior to contrast paints coming out. There's 3 of them. There's blue, red, and green. And on like larger stones or something like that, I might do like a proper highlighting technique for it. But these are really handy for these like little lenses because it creates a pretty damn convincing effect. If you use them, you're going to basically blob on, once you get highlighted white, you're going to blob it on and then drag the color down into the lower right or the lower left, whatever you want. And it creates a, like, again, pretty convincing lens or gemstone effect, if that's what you wanted to use it for. And it's super quick. As you can see, I'm just layering it on and then dragging the color down and letting it dry. And it's already glossy, so you can just leave it alone from there. And you're good to go. And then I do want to do a little bit of glowing effect on just a couple of figures that have what look like glowing like lens areas. And so this guy here with his deep sea diver helmet is one of them. What I'm using is, it's called Gauss Blaster, I think, from Citadel. And it's a very nice, bright, like light sea foam color, I guess is what I would call it. And it makes for a nice foundation for kind of energy weapons. And so here too, I'm painting that color in on the arm there. But you're going to water it down maybe even more than 50-50. Maybe it's like 3-to-1 of Vallejo thinning medium or water if you want to the paint. You're going to let that dry, apply it. I actually apply 2 coats of it, and then I do the same thing with just pure white in the very center, whatever it is that I'm painting. And what that does is it creates a very soft glowing effect. And again, it's super easy and effective. So there you have it. So here's the caster. I don't know any of the names of these for what it's worth. I'm just going to refer to them as what they kind of look like to me. This is Bane. So, and yeah, I guess the only thing I didn't mention that I did is I hit it all with matte varnish. Other than the metal areas, I use Army Painter Matte, which I would recommend anytime you wash a figure like this. And then I did some subtle blood effects as well. It's funny too, I of course just did the video on how I do all of my basing, which should be renamed now, how I do most of my basing, because on these figures they had some integrated pieces that were like of a cityscape. So I thought it would be more appropriate, and it would kind of match the grim color scheme that I went with to go with more of like an urban landscape. But I'll put links down in the description. I have a video on how to do blood effects. I have a video on how to do basing. In the basing video, you would just sub out the brown colors for dark gray, medium gray, and light gray. Otherwise, it's basically the same progression that I use, and I was a little bit more sparing with like the foliage that I put down. So otherwise, I'm very pleased with these. This were very easy to paint and very quick to paint. I think I painted these all up in, I would say, like 3 hours maybe total time over the course of a couple of days, because I usually paint like 30-40 minutes at a time. So, and that allows for drying time and stuff. So there you have it. There's the finished group here. I'm really, again, happy with these. Grateful to Young Seward again for sending these to me. I'll have more painting content to come. That's a little more sporadic, but some more review content first. But as ever, I appreciate you dropping by for this one in the meantime. And until next time, happy gaming.